What's she doing here, playing dress-up? The laughter rippled through the crowd of seasoned marksmen as the petite woman in oversized cargo pants adjusted her rifle scope at the Granite Ridge Shooting Championship. "Wait till she sees what real competition looks like," another competitor smirked, watching her fumble with her equipment case. But by round 15, when the smoke cleared and only one shooter remained standing, that same crowd would be asking a very different question. Who the hell is she? The annual Granite Ridge Precision Championship was no ordinary shooting competition. Held every October in the rugged mountains of northern Montana, it attracted the finest marksmen from across North America. Military snipers, law enforcement specialists, competitive shooters, and hunting legends gathered for what many considered the ultimate test of marksmanship skill. The competition was brutal. 20 rounds of increasingly difficult shots, ranging from 300 yards to an almost impossible 1,200-yard finale. Weather conditions changed hourly. Wind patterns shifted without warning. Only the most elite shooters survived past round 10. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. This year's field was particularly impressive. Jackson Bullseye Morrison, a decorated Marine sniper with 3 tours in Afghanistan. Tony Castellano, SWAT team leader from Chicago with over 50 confirmed takedowns. Derek Hoffman, Olympic shooting champion turned professional instructor. Sarah Blackthorne, the only woman to ever win the Canadian National Long Range Championship. These weren't weekend warriors or amateur enthusiasts. These were predators who lived and breathed precision shooting. So when Ava Sinclair walked onto the registration table that crisp Thursday morning, the reaction was predictable. At barely 5'2", with shoulder-length auburn hair, and wearing clothes that looked like hand-me-downs from an Army surplus store, she seemed wildly out of place. Her rifle case was battered and worn. Her shooting jacket had seen better decades. She carried herself quietly, almost timidly, speaking only when directly addressed by range officials. "First time at Granite Ridge?" asked the registration officer, a grizzled ex-Marine named Pete Sullivan who'd been running these competitions for 15 years. He'd seen plenty of wannabes show up thinking they could hang with the professionals. Most didn't make it past round 3. "Yes, sir," Ava replied softly, her voice barely audible over the morning chatter of arriving competitors. She handed over her paperwork with hands that seemed to tremble slightly. Her entry fee was paid in cash, crumpled 20s and 10s that she counted out carefully from a worn envelope. The other shooters watched with barely concealed amusement. Morrison nudged Castellano with his elbow. "Think she knows what she signed up for," he whispered loud enough for others to hear. "This ain't a church fundraiser shooting gallery." Castellano grinned. "Probably saw it advertised somewhere and thought it'd be fun. Give her credit for trying, I guess. Most people don't even have the courage to embarrass themselves this publicly." But there was something about the way Ava moved that caught the attention of retired Colonel James Hartford, the competition's founder and chief judge. Hartford had been organizing precision shooting events for over 2 decades, first in the military and now in civilian competitions. He'd developed an eye for reading people, for spotting the difference between confidence and arrogance, between skill and pretense. As Ava quietly unpacked her equipment, Hartford found himself watching more closely than usual. Her rifle was a puzzle. It looked like a standard Remington 700, probably 20 years old, with a scope that had clearly seen extensive use. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed professional-grade equipment. But the way she handled it spoke of deep familiarity. Her movements were economical, precise. She didn't fumble or hesitate. Every action served a purpose. The registration area buzzed with the usual pre-competition energy. Shooters compared equipment, shared stories from previous competitions, and sized up the new faces. Ava remained apart from the social dynamics, methodically checking her gear with a focus that bordered on meditation. She laid out her ammunition in perfect rows, examined each cartridge individually, and made notes in a small weathered notebook that she kept close to her chest. "Look at her playing soldier," laughed Rebecca Walsh, a competitive shooter from Texas, known for her sharp tongue and even sharper aim. "Probably learned everything she knows from YouTube videos and thinks she's ready for the big leagues." The mockery continued throughout the morning. When Ava asked the range officer about wind conditions, Morrison rolled his eyes. "Honey, you're worried about wind. Wait till you see what a real crosswind does to your shot at 800 yards. Maybe start with the local turkey shoots before jumping into the deep end." Even the range safety officers seemed to treat her differently, explaining basic rules that they assumed she didn't know, speaking slowly and clearly as if addressing a child. Ava nodded politely to each instruction, never arguing or asserting her knowledge, just quietly absorbing information and continuing her methodical preparation. But Colonel Hartford kept watching. There were small details that didn't add up. The way she instinctively checked wind direction every few minutes, how she positioned herself with clear sight lines to multiple target areas, the casual manner in which she calculated distances and elevations in her head. These weren't the behaviors of a novice who'd stumbled into the wrong competition. As the first round approached, the atmosphere grew more serious. 53 shooters had registered, representing the cream of North American marksmanship. The opening round was always straightforward: 5 shots at 300 yards, standing position, time limit of 10 minutes. Easy for professionals, manageable for serious amateurs, impossible for pretenders. Ava drew shooting position 47 near the end of the line. As competitors ahead of her took their turns, she continued her quiet observation, making notes about wind patterns and watching how each shooter adapted to the conditions. Her focus never wavered, but she remained invisible to most, just another face in the crowd of spectators waiting their turn. The laughter and casual dismissal would continue for exactly 14 more rounds. Ava Sinclair had arrived at Granite Ridge the evening before in a 20-year-old Ford pickup that wheezed and rattled up the mountain roads like it was breathing its last breath. She'd pulled into the Pineview Motel, a no-frills establishment that charged $38 a night and asked no questions. Her room was sparse: a single bed, a small table, and a window that looked out onto the parking lot where her truck sat among the luxury SUVs and high-end vehicles belonging to other competitors. She worked as a night shift security guard at Millbrook Industrial Complex, a sprawling manufacturing facility outside Denver where she'd been employed for the past 3 years. Her supervisor, Gary Hutchins, knew her as reliable but unremarkable. She showed up on time, walked her rounds without complaint, and filed her reports in neat handwriting that suggested attention to detail. She rarely spoke during shift changes, never participated in office conversations, and had never once called in sick. "Ava's solid," Gary would tell anyone who asked about her, though few ever did. "Quiet type, keeps to herself. Does her job, doesn't cause problems. Can't ask for more than that in this business." Her co-workers at the security firm barely knew her name. She was the shadow on the night shift, the one who took the routes nobody else wanted, working weekends and holidays without complaint. Her apartment was a modest one-bedroom in a complex that had seen better decades. The rent was $450 a month, utilities included. Her neighbors knew her as the woman in 2B, who never played music too loud, never had parties, and whose only visitor was the mail carrier. Mrs. Chen from next door occasionally saw her leaving for work, always carrying the same worn canvas bag and driving the same struggling pickup truck. Ava's daily routine was precisely structured. She woke at 3 p.m., made coffee in a pot that was older than her truck, and ate a simple meal while reading books borrowed from the public library. Military history, ballistics manuals, weather pattern studies, subjects that seemed oddly technical for a security guard, but the librarian at Millbrook Public never questioned anyone's reading choices. At 9 p.m. she'd drive to work, stopping at the same gas station for the same black coffee and granola bar. Her security rounds took her through empty warehouses and deserted office buildings, checking locks and documenting anything unusual in reports that rarely contained anything more exciting than all secure, no incidents. She carried a basic flashlight, a two-way radio that crackled with static, and a notebook where she recorded the times of her checks with military precision. Her financial situation was carefully managed, but obviously tight. She drove the old pickup because it was paid for. Her clothes came from thrift stores and discount retailers. She cut her own hair using a bathroom mirror and a pair of scissors she'd owned for years. Her grocery shopping was methodical, generic brands, bulk purchases when items were on sale, nothing frivolous or impulsive. The rifle she'd brought to Granite Ridge was her only significant possession. A 1998 Remington 700 that she'd purchased, used from a pawn shop 4 years earlier for $320. The scope was a loopholed Mark IV that looked like it had been through a war, which she'd found at an estate sale for $60. Her ammunition was carefully hand-loaded in her apartment kitchen using equipment that she'd assembled piece by piece from gun shows and online auctions. She practiced at Morrison Creek Range, a public facility 40 minutes from her apartment that charged $12 for a day pass. She went every other Sunday, bringing exactly 20 rounds of ammunition and staying for precisely 2 hours. The range officers knew her as a regular who never caused problems, cleaned up after herself, and shot alone. She never engaged in conversations about equipment or technique, just quietly worked through her practice routine and left. Her shooting position at Morrison Creek was always the same. Lane 15, the furthest from the office where she was least likely to be disturbed. She'd set up targets at various distances, making notes in the same weathered notebook she'd brought to Granite Ridge. Her practice sessions followed a strict protocol: 5 shots to warm up, 15 rounds at various distances and positions, then careful cleaning of her equipment before packing up. The other regular shooters at Morrison Creek had noticed her consistency but rarely spoke to her. That quiet girl who shoots by herself was how Ray Martinez, the range master, described her to anyone who asked. Never misses what she's aiming at, that much I can tell you. Doesn't waste ammunition either. Wish more people shot like her, clean, focused, respectful of the range rules. Her entry into the Granite Ridge Championship had been an impulsive decision, or at least it appeared that way. She'd seen the advertisement in a shooting magazine at the public library and had stared at it for several minutes before carefully tearing out the page. The entry fee of $200 represented nearly a week's wages after taxes, but she'd withdrawn the money from her savings account without hesitation. Her preparation for the competition had been characteristically methodical. She'd researched the event online using computers at the library, studying previous year's results, and reading about the course conditions. She'd practiced specific scenarios that might arise during the competition, shooting in various weather conditions and adjusting her technique accordingly. The drive to Montana had taken her 2 days, with an overnight stop at a roadside motel in Wyoming. She'd packed carefully, her rifle in its worn case, enough ammunition for practice and competition, basic camping gear in case the motel situation didn't work out, and 3 changes of clothes. Her budget was tight enough that she'd brought sandwiches for the road trip rather than stopping at restaurants. Now, sitting in her motel room at Granite Ridge, she methodically cleaned her rifle for the 3rd time since arriving. The television was off. Her phone was charging on the small table. Tomorrow would bring the real test, but tonight was for preparation and the kind of focused calm that comes from years of routine. To everyone who'd seen her at registration, Ava Sinclair was exactly what she appeared to be, an ordinary working woman who'd somehow gotten the mistaken impression that she belonged in a competition with the nation's elite marksmen, a security guard with delusions of grandeur, playing dress-up with equipment she'd probably bought on credit. They had no idea that the woman quietly cleaning her rifle in room 12 of the Pineview Motel was about to rewrite every assumption they'd ever made about what ordinary people were capable of accomplishing. The morning of the first day brought crisp October air and the kind of confident banter that always surrounded elite shooting competitions. As competitors gathered at the firing line for equipment inspection and final registration checks, the social hierarchy became immediately apparent. The established champions clustered together, sharing stories and technical discussions about barrel harmonics and ballistic coefficients. The serious amateurs formed their own groups, eager to learn from proximity to greatness. And then there was Ava Sinclair, standing alone near shooting position 47, methodically arranging her gear while conversations swirled around her. Jackson Morrison was holding court near the equipment check station, regaling a small audience with tales from his military service. "The thing about long-range shooting," he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, "is that it separates the wheat from the chaff real quick. You either have what it takes or you wash out. No middle ground." His eyes swept across the gathering and landed on Ava with obvious amusement. Some people think they can just show up with a hunting rifle and compete with operators who've been doing this for decades. Tony Castellano nodded in agreement, adjusting the scope on his custom-built precision rifle that probably cost more than Ava's annual salary. It's not just about the equipment, though that matters. It's about understanding ballistics, reading environmental conditions, managing stress under pressure. You can't learn that from books or weekend range sessions. He gestured toward Ava's position. "Look at her setup. That rifle's older than some of the ammunition we're shooting today." The mockery wasn't limited to the male competitors. Rebecca Walsh, checking the 0 on her precision rig, shook her head as she observed Ava's preparation routine. "I admire the confidence," she said to Sarah Blackthorne, loud enough to carry across several shooting positions. "But there's a difference between confidence and delusion. Someone should probably explain to her what she's gotten herself into before she embarrasses herself completely." Sarah Blackthorne, generally more diplomatic than her fellow competitors, still couldn't hide her skepticism. "Maybe she's here for the experience. Nothing wrong with trying, I suppose, though I have to wonder who told her she was ready for this level of competition." She watched as Ava carefully cleaned her scope lenses for the 3rd time. That equipment maintenance routine suggests she takes shooting seriously, but serious and qualified are 2 different things. The range officers were equally dismissive, though they tried to maintain professional courtesy. When Ava approached the equipment inspection station, Range Safety Officer Mike Brennan examined her rifle with the kind of patient condescension usually reserved for children showing off homework projects. "This is your competition rifle?" he asked, hefting the well-worn Remington. "Have you had it professionally accurized? When was the last barrel inspection?" Ava answered his questions quietly and completely, providing maintenance records and accuracy data that she kept in her weathered notebook. Brennan flipped through the pages with growing surprise at the detailed documentation, but his expression remained skeptical. Well, it meets the technical requirements, he admitted reluctantly. Just remember, equipment failure during competition rounds results in automatic disqualification. Might want to have a backup plan ready. Even Pete Sullivan, the registration officer, who'd processed hundreds of competitor entries over the years, found himself second-guessing the decision to accept her application. You understand this is a precision rifle competition, not a hunting exhibition, he asked as he handed her the official competitor packet. The targets start at 300 yards and go out to 1,200. The time limits are strict and there's no coaching allowed once you're on the line. The veteran competitors weren't content with casual dismissal. As the morning progressed, their comments became more pointed and public. Derek Hoffman, the former Olympic champion, made a show of offering advice that was clearly intended to highlight Ava's amateur status. "First time at a precision competition?" he asked, approaching her position with theatrical concern. "The wind conditions here can be tricky. You'll want to watch for mirage patterns and thermal shifts. Probably nothing you've encountered at your local range." Ava nodded politely and thanked him for the advice, which only seemed to encourage more unsolicited guidance. Morrison wandered over during the equipment setup period, ostensibly to help, but clearly motivated by curiosity and amusement. "That's an interesting choice of ammunition," he observed, examining the hand-loaded cartridges she was arranging in precise rows. "Home loads can be unpredictable under competition stress. Most of us use factory-match ammunition for consistency." When Ava explained that she'd been developing and testing her hand loads for over 2 years, recording detailed performance data for various environmental conditions, Morrison exchanged glances with nearby competitors. "Well, that's thorough," he said with barely concealed condescension. "Just remember that what works on your practice range might not translate to competition conditions. The pressure's different here." The other competitors began placing informal bets on how quickly she'd eliminate herself from contention. Castellano started a pool predicting she wouldn't survive the first 3 rounds. "I'll take round 2, volunteered Walsh. "Soon as she sees what real wind drift looks like at 500 yards, she'll pack up and head home." Hoffman opted for round 1. "The standing position shots will expose any fundamental flaws in her technique. No hiding behind shooting rests and sandbags here." The range staff had seen enough overconfident amateurs to recognize the pattern, and Ava seemed to fit the profile perfectly. Range Master Tom Bradley briefed his safety officers on competitors to watch closely during the early rounds. "Keep an eye on position 47, he advised. "Classic case of someone who thinks local range success translates to competition performance. She'll probably struggle with time management and stress response." Even the few spectators who'd gathered to watch the opening rounds seemed to view Ava as a source of entertainment rather than legitimate competition. Bob Patterson, a retired shooting instructor who attended Granite Ridge every year, pointed her out to his wife, Margaret. "See the little lady with the old rifle. She's either incredibly brave or incredibly naive. My money's on naive. This isn't the kind of competition where enthusiasm makes up for experience." The physical environment itself seemed to reinforce the narrative of misplaced confidence. The Granite Ridge facility was intimidating by design, with professional-grade equipment stations, sophisticated wind measurement systems, and target arrays that stretched across a valley that seemed to go on forever. The morning sun cast long shadows across the shooting line, highlighting the gap between professional-grade equipment and Ava's modest setup. As the first round preparation reached its final stages, the dismissive atmosphere had solidified into confident prediction. The established competitors were already looking ahead to the later rounds, discussing strategy for the challenging long-distance shots that would determine the ultimate winner. Ava remained focused on her immediate preparation, seemingly oblivious to the conversations happening around her about her inevitable early elimination. The social dynamics were clear. She was an outsider who'd somehow gained entry to an exclusive club, and the membership was eager to demonstrate why the barriers existed in the first place. In less than an hour, the first round would begin, and everyone was certain they knew exactly how this story would unfold. They were about to discover just how wrong they could be. The first round commenced at precisely 8 a.m. with Rangemaster Tom Bradley's announcement echoing across the valley. Shooters to the line, first relay, positions 1 through 10. 5 shots, 300 yards, standing position unsupported. 10-minute time limit begins when the target system activates. The professional-grade electronic scoring system hummed to life, and the first group of competitors took their positions with practiced confidence. Morrison led off the competition with a display that reminded everyone why he commanded respect. Standing with textbook form, he delivered 5 shots in rapid succession that clustered within a 2-inch group at the target's center. The electronic scoreboard flashed his results: 49 out of a possible 50 points, with 4 X-ring hits. The gathered competitors nodded appreciatively. This was the standard they expected from elite competition. As subsequent relays progressed through the first round, the pecking order established itself predictably. Castellano matched Morrison's performance with another 49. Hoffman, drawing on his Olympic experience, posted a perfect 50 with 5 X-ring hits that drew scattered applause from spectators. Walsh and Blackthorne both delivered solid 48s, confirming their status as serious contenders. The established champions were performing exactly as anticipated. When Ava's relay was called for round 4, she walked to position 47 with the same quiet focus she'd maintained all morning. But something shifted as she settled into her shooting stance. The uncertainty that had characterized her earlier interactions vanished, replaced by a stillness that seemed almost mechanical in its precision. She adjusted her rifle's position with micro-movements that spoke of muscle memory developed over countless hours of practice. "Targets activated. 10 minutes on the clock," announced Bradley. The competitors on either side of Ava began their shooting sequences immediately, eager to establish rhythm and account for environmental conditions. But Ava remained motionless for nearly 30 seconds, studying wind indicators and reading mirage patterns through her scope with an intensity that suggested she was processing far more information than a casual observer might expect. When she finally began shooting, the rhythm was unlike anything the observers had seen from her during equipment preparation. Her first shot broke cleanly, followed by a pause of exactly 12 seconds before the second shot. Each subsequent shot followed the same precise timing, as if she was operating according to an internal metronome that accounted for factors invisible to spectators. The electronic scoring system registered each impact immediately. Shot 1, X-ring center. Shot 2, X-ring center. Shot 3, X-ring center. The pattern was developing with mechanical consistency that caused several nearby competitors to glance in her direction. This wasn't the erratic performance they'd expected from an amateur struggling with competition nerves. Bradley, monitoring the competition from his elevated observation post, found himself focusing on position 47 with growing interest. Through his spotting scope, he could see that Ava's group was developing into something remarkable. Her fourth shot landed within millimeters of her previous impacts, and her fifth completed a cluster that measured less than 1 inch center to center at 300 yards. The final result flashed on the scoreboard: 50 points with 5 X-ring hits, matching Hoffman's perfect round but with a group size that was measurably tighter. A few scattered comments rippled through the spectator area, but most competitors were too focused on their own preparation for round 2 to pay significant attention to what had just occurred at position 47. Round 2 introduced the first real challenge, prone position at 500 yards with a crosswind that had been building since dawn. The wind flags along the range showed consistent left-to-right movement at approximately 8 miles per hour, but experienced competitors knew that conditions could vary significantly across the extended distance. This was where amateur shooters typically revealed their limitations, either by failing to read wind conditions accurately or by overcorrecting based on incomplete understanding of ballistic drift. Morrison, shooting early in the sequence, delivered another solid performance despite visible frustration with wind-induced variance. His group measured 3 inches with a score of 47 points, respectable but clearly affected by the challenging conditions. "Winds gustier than the flags are showing," he muttered to Castellano as he left the firing line. "You'll want to hold an extra half-mil dot left, maybe more." Castellano took the advice and managed a 46, though his group showed the telltale vertical stringing that indicated he was fighting both wind drift and elevation uncertainty. Hoffman, drawing on his international competition experience, posted another strong 48, but his shooting rhythm was noticeably slower as he worked to read the changing conditions between shots. When Ava's relay was called for round 2, she approached the firing line with the same measured pace that had characterized her first round performance. But observers who'd been paying attention noticed subtle differences in her preparation routine. She spent more time studying the grass movements at various distances, making notes in her weathered notebook about wind patterns that weren't visible on the official range flags. Her prone position setup was textbook perfect, with rifle cant precisely leveled and body alignment that maximized stability. But what caught Bradley's attention was the way she adjusted her scope between shots, making corrections that suggested she was reading environmental conditions in real time and compensating for factors that other competitors were either missing or unable to account for. The 5-shot sequence unfolded with the same methodical precision that had characterized her first round performance, but with additional complexity that revealed deeper technical knowledge. Her first shot established a baseline, confirming her wind reading. The second shot incorporated a slight adjustment for thermal effects that were beginning to develop as morning sun warmed the valley floor. Subsequent shots demonstrated progressively refined understanding of how multiple environmental factors were interacting to affect bullet trajectory. Her final group at 500 yards measured 1.8 inches with another perfect score of 50 points and 5 X-ring hits. The result was statistically remarkable, representing shooting precision that exceeded what most competitors could achieve under ideal conditions, let alone in the challenging crosswind that had troubled even the most experienced marksmen. Dr. Patricia Hayes, a ballistics expert who attended Granite Ridge annually to observe advanced marksmanship techniques, made detailed notes about Position 47's performance. That level of wind reading and compensation suggests either exceptional natural talent or very sophisticated training, she remarked to Rangemaster Bradley. Amateur shooters don't typically demonstrate that kind of environmental awareness in their first major competition. By the end of round 2, whispers were beginning to circulate among spectators and competitors alike. The woman at position 47 wasn't just surviving the early rounds, she was excelling with a consistency that defied explanation. But the real challenges were still ahead, and everyone assumed that increased pressure and distance would eventually expose whatever limitations were allowing her temporary success. What they didn't realize was that they'd just witnessed the warm-up phase of a performance that would completely redefine their understanding of what exceptional marksmanship looked like. Colonel James Hartford had been observing precision shooting competitions for over 30 years, first as a military instructor and later as the founder of the Granite Ridge Championship. He had developed an instinct for reading competitors that went beyond simple scoreboard results. Technical proficiency could be measured, but the subtle indicators of advanced training, the micro-adjustments, environmental awareness, and stress management techniques required a more experienced eye to recognize. During the break between rounds 2 and 3, Hartford positioned himself at the observation tower with his high-powered spotting scope, focusing specifically on the competitors who'd posted perfect scores. Hoffman's Olympic pedigree was evident in his structured approach and mechanical consistency. Morrison's military background showed in his aggressive confidence and rapid shot execution. But position 47 presented a puzzle that didn't fit any recognizable pattern. Ava's preparation routine was unlike anything Hartford had cataloged in decades of competition observation. She moved through a systematic process that appeared to account for variables most competitors either ignored or were unaware existed. Her wind reading technique involved multiple reference points at different distances, not just the standard flags that provided basic directional information. She was calculating atmospheric density effects, thermal layer variations, and even minute differences in humidity that could affect bullet trajectory across extended ranges. "Tom," Hartford called to Rangemaster Bradley, "pull up the detailed scoring data for position 47. I want to see shot timing intervals and group measurements." The electronic scoring system maintained precise records of every aspect of each competitor's performance, including the exact timing between shots and the mathematical precision of group spacing. Bradley accessed the computer terminal and pulled up Ava's performance data. "Interesting," he murmured, studying the numbers. "Her shot intervals are almost perfectly consistent, 11 to 13 seconds between shots, regardless of environmental conditions. That suggests she's working through a complex mental checklist before each trigger pull." He scrolled through additional data. Group measurements are statistically anomalous. Both rounds show precision levels that exceed what we typically see from established champions. Hartford adjusted his spotting scope to observe Ava's position more closely. She was sitting quietly beside her rifle, making entries in her notebook with the methodical precision of someone recording scientific data rather than casual observations. Her posture suggested complete comfort with the competition environment, none of the nervous energy or fidgeting behavior typical of first-time competitors facing elite-level challenges. Round 3 introduced kneeling position shooting at 700 yards. A distance where atmospheric effects became dramatically more pronounced and minor technical errors were magnified exponentially. The target zone was reduced in size, requiring precision that eliminated all but the most skilled marksmen. This was traditionally where the competition field began to separate decisively between champions and contenders. Dr. Hayes, the ballistics expert, positioned herself near Hartford's observation post with her own technical equipment. "I've been analyzing the environmental data," she informed Hartford. "We've got a complex atmospheric situation developing. Temperature differential between valley floor and ridge elevation is creating thermal layers that will affect bullet trajectory in unpredictable ways. Most competitors will struggle to account for these vertical wind currents." The early shooters in round 3 immediately demonstrated the increased difficulty. Morrison, despite his extensive experience, posted a 44 after his group spread vertically due to thermal effects he hadn't anticipated. Castellano managed a 45, but his shooting rhythm was notably slower as he struggled to read the changing conditions between shots. Even Hoffman, with his international competition background, delivered only a 46 as thermal currents affected his normally precise elevation control. When Ava's relay was called, Hartford focused his spotting scope directly on her position to observe her adaptation to the dramatically increased challenge. Her kneeling position setup was technically flawless, demonstrating fundamental marksmanship skills that suggested extensive formal training. But more significantly, her pre-shooting routine had expanded to include additional environmental assessment techniques that Hartford recognized from advanced military sniper protocols. She was using a technique called mirage reading to assess thermal layer effects, observing heat shimmer patterns at multiple distances to map how atmospheric conditions would affect bullet trajectory across the extended range. This was not amateur-level knowledge. It was sophisticated environmental analysis that required both theoretical understanding and practical experience to execute effectively. Her 5-shot sequence at 700 yards unfolded with the same methodical precision that had characterized her earlier performance, but with additional complexity that revealed deeper technical expertise. Each shot incorporated corrections for multiple environmental variables that most competitors were either unaware of or unable to calculate accurately under time pressure. The result was another perfect score of 50 points, with 5 X-ring hits, achieved under conditions that had challenged every other competitor in the field. Her group measurement was 2.1 inches at 700 yards, representing precision that approached the theoretical limits of her equipment capabilities. Dr. Hayes recorded detailed observations about Ava's performance. That level of environmental compensation indicates training that goes far beyond civilian marksmanship instruction, she noted. The thermal reading technique she's using is taught in advanced military sniper schools, not weekend shooting courses. Her ballistic calculations are incorporating variables that require sophisticated understanding of atmospheric physics. Hartford was beginning to piece together a picture that didn't match the surface narrative of an amateur security guard competing above her skill level. The precision of her environmental analysis, the consistency of her shooting rhythm, and the mathematical accuracy of her ballistic compensations suggested training and experience that few civilians possessed. Range Safety Officer Mike Brennan approached Hartford's position with his own observations. "Colonel, I've been monitoring Position 47's equipment, handling, and safety protocols. Her rifle manipulation techniques are consistent with advanced tactical training. The way she operates the bolt, manages ammunition, and maintains muzzle discipline follows patterns I recognize from military precision shooting programs." As Round 3 concluded and competitors prepared for the increasingly challenging distances ahead, Hartford found himself focusing entirely on Position 47. The scoreboard showed that only 12 competitors had maintained perfect or near-perfect scores through the first 3 rounds. But Ava's performance stood out not just for its statistical excellence, but for the sophisticated technical knowledge it demonstrated. The competition was approaching the distances where exceptional marksmanship separated itself from merely excellent shooting. If his growing suspicions were correct, the challenges ahead would reveal capabilities that would fundamentally change how everyone present understood what they were witnessing. The question was no longer whether Ava could maintain her performance under increased pressure. The question was who she really was and where she'd acquired skills that seemed to exceed those of competitors with decades of documented elite-level experience. The Granite Ridge facility utilized a state-of-the-art competitor tracking system that integrated multiple data sources to maintain comprehensive records of every participant. The system included biometric scanners at registration, continuous video monitoring of all shooting positions, and an AI-powered performance analysis program that flagged statistical anomalies in real time. What had started as routine data collection was now generating alerts that demanded immediate attention. Dr. Amanda Foster, the competition's chief technology officer and former systems analyst for the Department of Defense, monitored the data streams from her control station overlooking the range. The AI system had been designed to identify potential safety issues, equipment malfunctions, and scoring irregularities, but this morning it was flagging something entirely different. Position 47 was generating performance metrics that fell outside established parameters for civilian marksmanship competition. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Tom, you need to see this," Foster called to Rangemaster Bradley, pointing to her primary monitor. "The AI analysis is flagging position 47 for statistical impossibility. Her performance consistency is exceeding what the system recognizes as humanly achievable under these conditions." She pulled up comparative data from previous year's competitions. "Look at this variance analysis. Most elite competitors show measurable performance degradation as environmental challenges increase. She's showing the opposite pattern: improvement under stress." Bradley studied the data display with growing concern. The system was designed to flag potential scoring errors or equipment advantages that might provide unfair competitive benefits. But the alerts surrounding position 47 suggested something more complex. "What's the confidence interval on these calculations?" he asked. 99.7%, Foster replied. "The system has analyzed performance data from over 15,000 competition participants across 12 years. Position 47's consistency metrics are 6 standard deviations outside normal parameters. Statistically, this level of performance shouldn't be possible without significant technological assistance or training that exceeds civilian norms." The facility's security monitoring system was simultaneously generating its own alerts. Chief Security Officer Robert Kane had been reviewing video footage from the registration and equipment areas, following standard protocols for competitor background verification. What he'd discovered had prompted him to initiate deeper investigational procedures typically reserved for suspected security threats. "Colonel Hartford," Kane approached the observation post with a tablet displaying video analysis results. "We've got some irregularities in our background verification process for position 47. The competitor's identification documents check out through standard civilian databases, but there are some anomalies in the digital footprint that suggest possible data scrubbing." Hartford accepted the tablet and reviewed Kane's findings. "What kind of anomalies?" "Employment history that's too clean," Kane explained. "Social media presence that appears manufactured rather than organic. Financial records that show consistent but unremarkable income, but with periodic, unexplained gaps. Credit history that suggests someone who's been deliberately maintaining a low profile rather than someone living paycheck to paycheck." He scrolled through additional data. Most concerning, her vehicle registration and insurance records only go back 4 years, despite her claimed Colorado residency of 7 years. The facility's medical monitoring system added another layer of complexity to the developing picture. Dr. Sarah Chen, the on-site medical officer responsible for competitor health and safety, had been conducting routine stress assessments using remote monitoring equipment that tracked heart rate, respiration, and other physiological indicators during high-pressure shooting sequences. Position 47 is showing physiological responses that are completely inconsistent with first-time competition stress, Dr. Chen reported to Hartford. Her heart rate during shooting sequences is actually decreasing rather than increasing. Respiration patterns suggest advanced stress management techniques typically associated with military or law enforcement tactical training. The range's environmental monitoring system was providing additional data that supported growing suspicions about Ava's background. Meteorological officer Lisa Rodriguez had been tracking how different competitors adapted to changing atmospheric conditions noting that most shooters required several rounds to adjust their techniques as environmental factors evolved throughout the day. Position 47 is anticipating atmospheric changes before they register on our monitoring equipment, Rodriguez observed. She's making ballistic corrections for thermal effects and wind pattern shifts that our instruments don't show for another 10 to 15 minutes. That suggests either exceptional intuitive ability or access to training that teaches advanced environmental prediction techniques. As round 4 approached, prone position at 900 yards, with increasingly complex atmospheric conditions, the monitoring systems were generating coordinated alerts that painted a comprehensive picture of anomalous performance. The AI analysis indicated statistical impossibility. Security screening suggested manufactured identity elements. Medical monitoring revealed stress response patterns inconsistent with civilian background. Environmental assessment showed predictive capabilities that exceeded normal human perception. Hartford called a brief administrative conference with his senior staff to review the accumulating evidence. "We've got a situation that requires careful handling," he began. "All of our monitoring systems are indicating that position 47 represents something beyond normal competitive parameters. The question is whether we're looking at a security concern, a verification issue, or something else entirely." Foster presented her technical analysis. The performance metrics suggest training and experience that significantly exceeds what civilian marksmanship programs provide. The consistency levels we're seeing typically require thousands of hours of practice under controlled conditions or intensive training in high-stress environments. Kane added his security assessment. The background verification irregularities suggest deliberate identity management, possibly professional-level operational security. Someone has invested significant effort in creating and maintaining a civilian cover identity. Dr. Chen contributed her medical observations. The physiological responses indicate advanced stress inoculation training. This person has been conditioned to perform optimally under pressure through methods that aren't available in civilian contexts. The consensus was clear. Ava Sinclair represented something far more complex than an amateur shooter who'd stumbled into elite competition. The monitoring systems were painting a picture of someone with advanced tactical training, sophisticated operational security awareness, and performance capabilities that suggested professional-level expertise. But the competition was proceeding according to schedule, and they had no regulatory basis for intervention based on suspicions alone. Hartford made the decision to continue monitoring while discreetly initiating deeper background verification through channels that extended beyond standard civilian databases. As Round 4 commenced with its 900-yard challenge, the facility's entire monitoring apparatus was focused on position 47. Every shot would be analyzed, every movement recorded, every physiological response measured. They were no longer simply observing a marksmanship competition. They were conducting an investigation into someone whose true identity and capabilities remained completely unknown. The systems were about to capture evidence that would confirm their suspicions in ways that none of them had anticipated. Colonel Hartford's investigation began with a series of discreet phone calls to contacts he'd cultivated during 3 decades of military service. The first call went to Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Morgan at the Pentagon's Personnel Security Research Center, a classified facility that maintained databases on individuals with advanced security clearances and specialized training backgrounds. "Pat, I need a favor," Hartford explained, speaking from his private office while the competition continued outside. "I've got someone here whose performance profile suggests military training, but civilian background checks are coming back clean. Too clean. I'm sending you biometric data and a photograph for cross-reference against your classified databases." Morgan's response was immediate and cautious. "Jim, you know I can't run unauthorized searches against protected databases. If this person has operational security protections in place, there are protocols that have to be followed." She paused, considering the implications. "Send me what you have through encrypted channels. I'll see what I can do without triggering any automated alert systems." Hartford's second call went to Chief Warrant Officer David Kim at the Army Marksmanship Unit, the military's premier training facility for precision shooting. Kim had been developing advanced sniper training programs for special operations units and would recognize performance indicators that suggested specialized instruction. "Dave, I'm observing marksmanship capabilities that don't match any civilian training profile I've seen," Hartford explained. "Environmental compensation techniques, stress management protocols, equipment handling procedures, everything suggests advanced military instruction. Can you review some performance footage and give me your assessment?" Kim agreed to analyze video footage from Ava's shooting sequences, promising to provide feedback within the hour. "If what you're describing is accurate, there are only a few facilities in the world that provide that level of instruction. Most of them are classified programs that don't officially exist." The third call was the most sensitive. Hartford contacted Rebecca Stone, a former colleague who now worked in classified personnel management for an agency whose name he couldn't mention over unsecured communications. Stone specialized in tracking individuals who'd transitioned from classified assignments to civilian covers, ensuring their security and monitoring potential exposure risks. "Beck, I may have stumbled onto someone who's supposed to be invisible," Hartford said carefully, using terminology that would convey the situation without triggering communication security protocols. "Performance profile suggests advanced tactical training, but all civilian verification systems are showing manufactured background data. I need to know if I should be concerned about operational exposure." Stone's response was immediate and serious. "Stop all investigations immediately. Do not share information with anyone else. Do not take additional photographs or recordings. I'll be there within 6 hours to assess the situation personally. If this is what I think it might be, continued exposure could compromise ongoing operations." While waiting for responses to his inquiries, Hartford initiated his own research using resources available through the Granite Ridge facility's advanced communication systems. The competition's internet infrastructure included access to military personnel databases that he maintained for competitor verification purposes, though these systems had limited search capabilities compared to active military networks. His search focused on cross-referencing Ava's known details with military training records, deployment databases, and specialized program rosters. The process was slow and methodical, requiring multiple search parameters and careful analysis of partial matches that might indicate sanitized records or cover identities. Rangemaster Bradley provided additional support by accessing historical competition databases to search for similar performance anomalies in previous years. "I've been reviewing performance data going back 15 years, Bradley reported. "We've never recorded consistency metrics like this from any competitor, regardless of their documented background. The statistical variance is literally off our measurement scales." Dr. Foster contributed her technical analysis capabilities, using the facility's AI systems to perform pattern recognition analysis on Ava's movement and technique videos. The AI is identifying micro-behaviors that suggest specific institutional training, Foster reported. Body positioning, equipment manipulation sequences, environmental assessment techniques. Everything matches patterns associated with advanced tactical instruction programs. 2 hours into the investigation, Hartford received his first substantive response. Chief Warrant Officer Kim called back with an assessment that confirmed his growing suspicions. "Jim, I've analyzed the footage you sent," Kim began. "What you're observing is consistent with instruction from the Army's Advanced Marksmanship Training Course, specifically the classified modules that we provide to special operations personnel. The environmental compensation techniques, ballistic calculation methods, and stress management protocols are taught exclusively in programs that require TS/SCI clearances." Kim's analysis became more specific. The mirage reading technique she's using was developed at our facility 3 years ago and is only taught to students with specific operational requirements. The equipment handling procedures match our advanced tactical shooting protocols exactly. This person has either received instruction at our facility or from someone who learned these techniques here. Lieutenant Colonel Morgan's response arrived through encrypted communication channels 30 minutes later. "Jim, I can't provide specific details over unsecured communications, but your biometric data matches records in protected databases. This individual is flagged for operational security protection at the highest levels. Cease all investigational activities immediately and await contact from designated personnel." The implications were becoming clear. Ava Sinclair was not simply a civilian with exceptional shooting abilities. She was someone whose true identity and background were protected by federal security protocols, typically reserved for individuals involved in the most sensitive government operations. Hartford's investigation had revealed that the monitoring systems at Granite Ridge had inadvertently identified someone who was supposed to remain invisible. The performance anomalies that had triggered their attention were the result of training and experience that existed within highly classified military programs. Her civilian cover identity had been carefully constructed to withstand routine background checks, but couldn't mask the behavioral indicators that suggested her true background. As round 4 continued on the firing line, Hartford faced a complex situation. The competition was proceeding normally, but he now knew that one of the participants represented potential operational security concerns that extended far beyond civilian marksmanship competition. Rebecca Stone's warning about operational exposure suggested that Ava's participation in a public event might have unintended consequences for ongoing classified activities. The facility's monitoring systems had done their job too well. They'd identified an anomaly that revealed the presence of someone whose background was deliberately hidden for national security reasons. Now, Hartford had to balance the integrity of the competition with responsibilities that extended far beyond the Granite Ridge facility. The investigation had answered some questions while raising others that were far more serious. Who was Ava Sinclair really? What operational activities required such extensive security protection? And what were the implications of her presence at a public competition where her capabilities were being documented and analyzed by multiple monitoring systems? Within hours, those questions would be answered by people with authority that extended far beyond civilian marksmanship competitions. Rebecca Stone arrived at Granite Ridge in an unmarked black SUV 3 hours ahead of schedule, accompanied by 2 agents whose credentials identified them only as Department of Defense Personnel Security. Stone herself carried identification that listed her position as Special Projects Coordinator, a deliberately vague title that provided no real information about her actual responsibilities or authority level. "Colonel Hartford," Stone's greeting was professionally cordial, but carried an undertone of urgency that immediately conveyed the seriousness of the situation. "I need to review all documentation, recordings, and analysis related to the individual you contacted me about. This is a matter of operational security that extends beyond civilian jurisdiction." Hartford escorted Stone and her team to the facility's administrative offices, where they could speak privately while the competition continued outside. "Before we proceed, I need to understand the scope of what we're dealing with," Hartford began. "My investigation has revealed performance indicators that suggest specialized military training, but I don't want to compromise anything that should remain classified." Stone opened a secure laptop and began accessing databases that Hartford recognized as far beyond his clearance level. "The individual you've identified is part of a classified transition program for personnel who've completed highly sensitive assignments. Her presence at this competition represents an operational security breach that could have serious consequences for ongoing national security activities." The laptop screen displayed information that Stone shared selectively with Hartford, revealing enough details to explain the gravity of the situation without compromising classified specifics. Ava Sinclair is a cover identity that was established 4 years ago for someone whose real name and background are protected under federal witness security protocols. Her actual identity is classified at levels that require presidential authorization to access. Stone's team began examining all facility records related to Ava's participation, including registration documents, video recordings, performance data, and any communication logs that mentioned her presence. "The monitoring systems at your facility have collected more detailed information about her capabilities than should exist in civilian databases," one of the agents explained to Dr. Foster. "This documentation represents a potential intelligence vulnerability." Hartford learned that Ava's real identity was linked to operations conducted by a joint military intelligence task force that had been dissolved 3 years earlier following the completion of assignments that remained highly classified. Personnel from that task force had been transitioned to civilian covers with new identities, ongoing security monitoring, and strict protocols designed to prevent their operational backgrounds from being discovered. "The precision shooting capabilities you've observed are consistent with her actual training and experience," Stone explained. "She was part of operations that required marksmanship skills far beyond conventional military standards. Her transition to civilian life included instructions to avoid activities that might reveal her background, but apparently those guidelines weren't specific enough to prevent her from entering competitive shooting events." The task force she'd been part of was known internally as Project Nightfall, a classified program that had conducted precision operations in locations where conventional military presence wasn't politically viable. Team members had received training at facilities that didn't appear on any official records, using techniques and technologies that represented the most advanced capabilities available to U.S. Special Operations Forces. Project Nightfall personnel were responsible for operations that prevented international incidents, neutralized specific threats, and gathered intelligence that couldn't be obtained through conventional means, Stone continued. "The program's existence is known only to a select group of officials at the highest levels of government. Personnel records were sealed permanently when the program concluded." Ava's specific role within Project Nightfall had involved precision operations in urban environments where collateral damage wasn't acceptable and operational secrecy was paramount. Her training had included advanced marksmanship instruction from the world's most elite facilities, environmental analysis techniques developed specifically for complex operational scenarios, and stress management protocols that allowed optimal performance under life-threatening pressure. Her civilian transition was managed through the Defense Intelligence Agency's Special Activities Division, Stone explained. New identity, employment history, financial records, and social presence were all carefully constructed to support a normal life, while maintaining operational security. The security guard position in Denver was selected specifically because it utilized skills relevant to her background while avoiding activities that might reveal her true capabilities. The revelation explained all the anomalies that had triggered Hartford's investigation. Ava's performance consistency resulted from training that involved thousands of hours of practice under conditions far more stressful than civilian competition. Her environmental analysis capabilities had been developed for operations where atmospheric conditions could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Her stress management responses reflected conditioning that had been tested in situations where human lives depended on perfect execution. Stone's team discovered that Ava's participation in the Granite Ridge competition violated specific protocols established for Project Nightfall alumni. Personnel were instructed to avoid activities that might reveal their operational backgrounds. Stone noted, competitive shooting events were specifically mentioned as prohibited because they would create documented evidence of capabilities that shouldn't exist in civilian records. The security implications extended beyond simple policy violations. The monitoring systems at Granite Ridge had collected detailed performance data that could potentially be used to identify other Project Nightfall personnel who might be living under similar cover identities. The artificial intelligence analysis had created behavioral profiles that might compromise the security of individuals whose locations and activities were supposed to remain unknown. "We need to implement immediate containment protocols," Stone announced. "All records related to this individual's performance must be classified and removed from civilian databases. Personnel who've observed her capabilities must be briefed on security requirements that prohibit discussion of what they've witnessed." Hartford learned that similar situations had occurred twice previously when Project Nightfall alumni had inadvertently revealed their backgrounds through activities that seemed innocuous but had attracted attention from individuals with the expertise to recognize anomalies. In both cases, extensive security reviews had been required to assess potential compromises and implement protective measures. "The individual's cover identity will need to be reassessed and possibly replaced," Stone explained. "Her continued presence at this competition represents an ongoing security risk that increases with every documented demonstration of her capabilities. We need to extract her from this situation while maintaining the appearance of normal civilian activity." As round 5 commenced outside with shooters attempting 1,000-yard shots in increasingly challenging conditions, Stone's team was implementing security protocols that would fundamentally change how the situation was managed. The competition would continue, but Ava Sinclair's participation had triggered responses that extended far beyond civilian marksmanship events into realms of national security that most participants couldn't imagine existed. Round 12 had arrived with conditions that separated true masters from merely excellent marksmen. The distance had stretched to 1,100 yards, and a complex weather system was creating atmospheric challenges that tested the limits of human marksmanship capability. Thermal inversions, shifting wind patterns, and variable humidity were combining to create ballistic conditions that required split-second calculations and intuitive understanding of environmental physics. Only 8 competitors remained in contention for the championship. Morrison had been eliminated in round 9 when crosswinds at 800 yards had exposed limitations in his wind-reading technique. Castellano had withdrawn in round 10 after equipment problems compromised his rifle's accuracy. Even Hoffman, with his Olympic pedigree, had been eliminated in round 11 when thermal effects caused elevation errors that dropped him below the qualifying threshold. The survivors represented the absolute elite of North American precision shooting, Sarah Blackthorne, whose methodical approach had proven remarkably consistent. Rebecca Walsh, whose aggressive style was perfectly suited to changing conditions, Derek Chen, a surprise qualifier whose equipment mastery had carried him further than anyone expected. Thomas Erickson, a Canadian champion with extensive cold-weather shooting experience. Michael Torres, a former Marine whose tactical background was showing under pressure. Dr. James Patterson, a competitive shooter whose scientific approach to ballistics was paying dividends. Colonel William Hayes, a veteran instructor whose decades of experience were evident in every shot. And Ava Sinclair, whose performance had become the primary focus of everyone present. The spectator area had grown throughout the day as word spread about the exceptional competition unfolding at Granite Ridge. Local media representatives had arrived to document what was shaping up to be one of the most competitive championships in the event's history. But the real attention was focused on Position 47, where Ava continued to deliver performance that defied rational explanation. Round 12 commenced with atmospheric conditions that Range Master Bradley described as near the theoretical limits for precision shooting competition. Temperature differentials between valley floor and ridge elevations were creating thermal currents that varied unpredictably across the extended range. Wind patterns were shifting direction and velocity every few minutes. Humidity levels were fluctuating as weather fronts moved through the area. Sarah Blackthorne, shooting first among the final 8, struggled visibly with the challenging conditions. Her normally steady rhythm was disrupted by the need to constantly reassess environmental factors between shots. Despite her extensive experience, she posted a 44 out of 50, with group spread indicating she was fighting both wind drift and thermal effects that she couldn't predict accurately enough to compensate. Rebecca Walsh followed with an aggressive approach that had served her well in previous rounds, but the complex atmospheric conditions punished rapid shooting techniques that didn't account for moment-to-moment changes in environmental factors. Her score of 42 reflected the difficulty of maintaining precision when conditions were changing faster than traditional compensation methods could accommodate. Derek Chen's scientific approach to equipment optimization had carried him to the final rounds, but round 12 exposed the limitations of relying primarily on technological solutions when atmospheric complexity exceeded what standard ballistic calculators could process. His score of 43 was respectable but clearly indicated that he was reaching the limits of his technical approach. Thomas Erickson's cold weather experience proved valuable in reading thermal effects, but the rapidly shifting wind patterns challenged his predominantly static shooting style. Michael Torres drew on his tactical background to adapt quickly to changing conditions, posting a solid 45 that kept him in contention. Dr. Patterson's ballistic expertise helped him achieve a 46, while Colonel Hayes delivered a 47 that demonstrated why experience remained crucial under extreme conditions. When Ava's turn arrived, the atmospheric complexity had reached levels that challenged the measurement capabilities of the range's environmental monitoring systems. Wind flags were showing different directions at various distances. Thermal readings were fluctuating beyond the range of standard ballistic calculations. Humidity sensors were detecting rapid changes that could affect bullet trajectory in unpredictable ways. But Ava approached the firing line with the same methodical calm that had characterized her entire performance. Her preparation routine had adapted throughout the day to account for increasing environmental complexity, incorporating assessment techniques that went far beyond what civilian marksmanship instruction typically provided. Colonel Hartford, observing through his spotting scope, while Rebecca Stone monitored from the administrative building, watched Ava execute a pre-shooting analysis that lasted nearly 3 minutes. She was reading atmospheric indicators at multiple points across the range, making calculations that accounted for factors that the official monitoring equipment wasn't sophisticated enough to measure accurately. Her 5-shot sequence at 1,100 yards unfolded under conditions that would have challenged the most advanced military snipers in the world. Each shot required real-time compensation for multiple environmental variables that were changing between trigger pulls. The mathematical complexity of the ballistic calculations she was performing mentally exceeded what most competitors could achieve with computer assistance. The first shot established her baseline reading of current conditions. The second shot incorporated a correction for thermal effects that had developed during the 30-second interval between shots. The third shot adjusted for wind pattern changes that were barely detectable but would significantly affect trajectory at the extended range. The fourth shot compensated for humidity variations that were affecting ballistic coefficient. The fifth shot integrated all environmental factors with corrections for equipment temperature effects that influenced barrel harmonics. Her group at 1,100 yards measured 2.7 inches center to center, a result that approached the theoretical accuracy limits of her equipment under ideal conditions, achieved under atmospheric circumstances that were anything but ideal. The scoreboard displayed another perfect 50 with 5 X-ring hits, extending her streak of flawless performance through 12 rounds of increasingly brutal challenges. The spectator area had fallen silent. The media representatives were filming continuously, documenting what many realized was potentially the greatest individual marksmanship performance in competitive shooting history. Fellow competitors stood transfixed, watching someone demonstrate capabilities that transcended everything they thought they understood about precision shooting. Dr. Hayes, the ballistics expert, was making detailed notes about atmospheric conditions and performance requirements. What we're witnessing exceeds the documented capabilities of civilian marksmanship training, she announced to anyone within hearing distance. The environmental compensation techniques being demonstrated require knowledge and experience that isn't available through conventional instruction programs. Colonel Hartford knew he was observing the real capabilities of someone whose background had been carefully hidden, but whose skills couldn't be completely suppressed. Project Nightfall had trained personnel to operate under conditions where perfect precision was required, regardless of environmental challenges. Ava was drawing on capabilities developed through programs that didn't officially exist, demonstrating why certain individuals required such extensive security protection. As round 13 prepared to commence, only 4 competitors remained qualified to continue. The combination of extreme distance and complex atmospheric conditions had eliminated half the final field in a single round. But Position 47 continued to deliver performance that seemed to operate according to different rules entirely, revealing capabilities that confirmed everything Rebecca Stone's investigation had discovered about Ava's true background. Round 15 arrived with atmospheric conditions that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible for competitive marksmanship. The final distance of 1,200 yards, combined with crosswinds gusting to 15 miles per hour and thermal effects that were creating mirage distortions visible to the naked eye, had reduced the field to just 2 competitors: Dr. James Patterson, whose scientific approach to ballistics had carried him further than anyone expected, and Ava Sinclair, whose performance had transcended every conventional understanding of precision shooting capability. Dr. Patterson approached his final attempt with visible tension. His methodical, analytical approach had served him well through 14 rounds, but the extreme conditions of round 15 were testing the limits of what computational ballistics could achieve. He spent nearly 5 minutes analyzing environmental data, consulting ballistic charts, and making calculations on a handheld computer before settling into his shooting position. His first shot hit the target but landed outside the X-ring, affected by thermal currents that had shifted during his extended preparation period. The second shot corrected for the observed conditions, but overcorrected, landing on the opposite side of the target center. By his third shot, Patterson was clearly struggling with the rapidly changing atmospheric conditions, posting impacts that showed increasing dispersion as environmental factors outpaced his ability to calculate compensation accurately. His final group measured 8 inches with a score of 41 out of 50 possible points. It was a respectable performance under impossibly difficult conditions, but it represented the practical limits of traditional marksmanship techniques when environmental complexity exceeded what conventional training could accommodate. Patterson removed his shooting gloves and shook his head in frustrated acknowledgement that he had reached the absolute boundaries of his capabilities. The spectator area had grown to include local television crews, newspaper reporters, and shooting enthusiasts who had driven from neighboring states after word spread about the extraordinary competition unfolding at Granite Ridge. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation as everyone realized they were about to witness either the greatest individual marksmanship achievement in competitive history or the moment when even exceptional skill would finally succumb to impossible conditions. Rebecca Stone watched from the administrative building through high-powered optics, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether Ava's cover identity could be maintained, or whether her participation in this public event would require comprehensive security intervention. The level of attention focused on Position 47 had already exceeded what operational security protocols considered acceptable for Project Nightfall alumni. Colonel Hartford positioned himself at the primary observation post with multiple spotting scopes and environmental monitoring equipment, determined to document whatever was about to unfold. 30 years of experience in precision shooting had never prepared him for observing performance that operated at levels he hadn't known were achievable. The technical analysis capabilities of the Granite Ridge facility were about to record data that would fundamentally challenge existing understanding of human marksmanship potential. As Ava approached the firing line for round 15, her preparation routine expanded to accommodate the extreme environmental complexity. She spent 10 minutes conducting atmospheric analysis that incorporated techniques Hartford recognized from advanced military sniper training, but had never seen executed with such systematic precision under competition conditions. She was reading wind patterns at multiple elevations, calculating thermal layer effects, and assessing atmospheric density variations that required understanding of environmental physics far beyond civilian instruction. The 1,200-yard target appeared impossibly small through standard rifle scopes, requiring precision that eliminated any margin for error in environmental compensation. Wind indicators showed conditions that were changing direction and velocity every 30 to 40 seconds. Thermal effects were creating heat shimmer that distorted visual references used for range estimation. Humidity fluctuations were affecting ballistic coefficients in real time, requiring constant recalculation of trajectory predictions. Her shooting position setup incorporated stability techniques that maximized consistency under the challenging conditions. But more significantly, her mental preparation routine suggested stress management protocols that allowed optimal performance when environmental factors were creating pressure that overwhelmed most competitors' ability to function effectively. The first shot broke with mechanical precision after a deliberate pause that indicated complex mental calculations. The impact registered in the X-ring center, confirming that her initial environmental assessment had been accurate despite conditions that were defeating sophisticated computer-assisted ballistic calculations. The second shot required adjustment for thermal effects that had developed during the interval between shots. Her correction was precise enough to maintain X-ring accuracy while accommodating atmospheric changes that would have required multiple shots for most competitors to identify and compensate. The third shot incorporated wind pattern shifts that were barely detectable but would significantly affect trajectory at the extreme range. Her compensation demonstrated environmental reading capabilities that exceeded what standard training provided, suggesting experience with atmospheric analysis techniques developed for operational requirements where precision couldn't be compromised regardless of conditions. The fourth shot adjusted for humidity variations and equipment temperature effects, while maintaining the precision timing that had characterized her entire performance. The mathematical complexity of the real-time ballistic calculations she was executing mentally exceeded what most professionals could achieve with computer assistance under ideal conditions. The fifth and final shot of the competition integrated all environmental factors with corrections for equipment variables and atmospheric effects that required understanding developed through training programs that didn't exist in civilian contexts. The shot broke cleanly after a pause that suggested she was accounting for factors beyond what conventional marksmanship instruction recognized as relevant variables. Her final group at 1,200 yards measured 2.9 inches center to center with a perfect score of 50 points and 5 X-ring hits. The result represented precision that approached the theoretical accuracy limits of any rifle system under any conditions, achieved under atmospheric circumstances that had defeated every other competitor in the field. The spectator area erupted in sustained applause, but the celebration was tempered by an undercurrent of bewilderment. What everyone had witnessed exceeded rational explanation. The performance had transcended the boundaries of what competitive shooting was supposed to demonstrate, revealing capabilities that operated according to principles that few present understood. Media representatives were filming continuously, documenting the moment when Ava Sinclair was declared champion of the most competitive precision shooting championship in North America. But Colonel Hartford and Rebecca Stone knew that the real significance of what had just occurred extended far beyond civilian marksmanship competition. As Ava quietly collected her equipment and prepared to receive the championship trophy, the aftermath of her public demonstration was about to trigger security protocols that would fundamentally change her carefully constructed civilian life. The performance that had captivated everyone present had also exposed capabilities that were supposed to remain forever hidden. The championship trophy presentation took place as planned, but the atmosphere had shifted from celebration to something more complex and uncertain. Ava accepted the Crystal Award with the same quiet composure she'd maintained throughout the competition, offering brief thanks to the organizers and fellow competitors before beginning to pack her equipment with systematic efficiency that suggested she understood the situation had changed irrevocably. Local media representatives conducted interviews with the runners-up and competition officials, but their primary focus was on documenting what many were already calling the greatest individual marksmanship achievement in competitive shooting history. Television crews captured footage of Ava's equipment and shooting position, while sports journalists attempted to schedule interviews that she politely declined, explaining that she needed to return to work responsibilities in Denver. But even as the official ceremonies concluded, Rebecca Stone's security team was implementing extraction protocols that would remove Ava from public view before her continued presence created additional operational security complications. The level of attention and documentation surrounding her performance had already exceeded what Project Nightfall alumni were supposed to experience under any circumstances. "Ma'am, we need to speak privately." Stone approached Ava as she loaded her rifle case into her pickup truck. The conversation that followed was brief and conducted in terms that appeared casual to outside observers but conveyed the urgency of immediate compliance with security directives. Ava's response indicated she understood both the implications of her public performance and the necessity of cooperative engagement with security personnel. Within 30 minutes of the competition's conclusion, Ava's pickup truck was following Stone's unmarked SUV along mountain roads that led away from the Granite Ridge facility toward a secure location where comprehensive security debriefing could be conducted without civilian interference. Her civilian life as a Denver security guard had effectively ended the moment her final shot confirmed capabilities that couldn't be explained through conventional backgrounds. The immediate aftermath at Granite Ridge involved careful management of information and documentation that had been collected throughout the competition. Dr. Foster's technical team was instructed to classify all performance data related to Position 47 above civilian access levels, ensuring that detailed analysis of Ava's capabilities wouldn't be available through standard competitive shooting databases. Colonel Hartford received detailed briefings about operational security requirements that prohibited discussion of what he'd observed during the competition. The extraordinary nature of Ava's performance would be attributed to exceptional natural talent and dedicated practice, rather than training that suggested specialized military background. Media coverage would focus on the human interest aspects of an unknown competitor achieving unexpected success, rather than technical analysis that might reveal anomalous capabilities. Range Safety Officer Mike Brennan and his team were provided security guidance that classified their observations of Ava's equipment handling and shooting techniques. The tactical proficiency they'd recognized during the competition was information that couldn't be shared with civilian personnel or included in official competition reports that might be accessed by unauthorized individuals. Dr. Patricia Hayes, the ballistics expert who documented the technical impossibility of Ava's performance under the extreme conditions, found her research notes confiscated by Stone's security team. Her analysis of environmental compensation techniques and precision capabilities would be incorporated into classified assessments rather than published in civilian marksmanship journals, where it might be analyzed by foreign intelligence services. The other competitors struggled to process what they'd witnessed, knowing that conventional explanations couldn't account for the level of performance they'd observed. Sarah Blackthorne spent hours reviewing her own shooting data, trying to identify technical improvements that might allow similar precision under challenging conditions. Dr. Patterson analyzed his ballistic calculations repeatedly, seeking mathematical approaches that could accommodate the environmental complexity that had overwhelmed his scientific methods. But their analysis efforts were limited by access to information about techniques and training programs that remained classified above their clearance levels. The environmental compensation methods they'd observed were developed through programs whose existence couldn't be acknowledged in civilian contexts, representing capabilities that were supposed to remain invisible to protect ongoing operational activities. Local media coverage of the competition focused on the human interest story of an unknown competitor who defeated established champions through exceptional dedication and natural ability. Television interviews with range officials emphasized the traditional values of hard work and perseverance, rather than technical analysis that might suggest specialized training backgrounds. The narrative that emerged portrayed Ava as an inspiring example of individual achievement, rather than evidence of advanced military capabilities. But within the specialized community of precision shooting professionals, questions persisted about performance that exceeded documented human capabilities under the extreme conditions of Round 15. Internet forums devoted to competitive marksmanship began analyzing available video footage and performance data, generating theories about training methods and equipment modifications that might explain what had been observed. These discussions attracted attention from intelligence analysts who monitored civilian communications for indications of classified program exposure. Additional security measures were implemented to discourage detailed technical analysis of Ava's performance while maintaining the appearance of normal competitive shooting community interest in exceptional achievements. 6 months later, the precision shooting community had largely moved on to other competitions and achievements, though Ava's performance at Granite Ridge remained a subject of occasional discussion among enthusiasts who appreciated exceptional marksmanship. The official records showed that an amateur competitor had achieved remarkable success through dedication and natural talent, inspiring others to pursue excellence in their own shooting endeavors. But the deeper lesson that emerged from the competition extended beyond marksmanship technique or training methods. The experience had demonstrated that exceptional capability often exists in forms that society doesn't recognize or expect. The most remarkable achievements frequently come from individuals whose backgrounds and experiences remain invisible to casual observation. The security guard who dominated elite competition had reminded everyone present that true expertise doesn't always announce itself through obvious indicators. The person changing your locks might be a former engineer. The janitor cleaning your office might have advanced technical training. The quiet individual who seems unremarkable might possess capabilities that would astonish you if circumstances ever required their demonstration. Ava Sinclair had vanished back into whatever classified existence required such extensive security protection, but her brief public appearance had left a lasting impact on everyone who'd witnessed capabilities that transcended conventional understanding. Her story became a reminder that the most extraordinary people often choose to remain invisible, protecting their communities and their country through service that can never be acknowledged or celebrated. The greatest strength, as her competition had demonstrated, is often the strength that never needs to prove itself, until the moment when circumstances demand perfection and heroes emerge from the shadows where they've been quietly serving all along. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.